Hello and welcome back. We have another match for you tonight between Kdowns and Panzer, and I'm going to be commentating this match with SensFan, who is right here with me.
How are you doing tonight, Cal?
Pretty good, actually, after watching whatever it was we just
I was
watched.
going to say, we're following that one up with this match between Kdowns and Panzer, like you said.
Yes, a classic matchup from Magic history.
Absolutely. And so with that, we're going to start with the first deck here. Kdowns is playing Blue Moon. What jumps out to you with that deck?
Well, when somebody asked me about it the other week, they asked me, so what is Blue Moon except for blue cards and Blood Moon? And I said, well, it's a bunch of blue cards and Blood Moons.
All right.
And that's basically the deck, is you try to counter your opponent's stuff, you try to play Blood Moon to lock their mana out of the game, and you find some way to win the game. Often it's very slow and agonizing, but it eventually gets there.
So lock them out of their mana, lock them out of their ability to cast spells, and profit from there.
Yes, and once you get in that overwhelming favorite position, you're probably going to win the game.
And so what, if any, tech choices has Kdowns made to sort of separate his deck from just a generic Blue Moon list?
Well, he has his main deck engineered explosives, because often what control decks like this have a problem with is really fast, aggressive, creature-heavy decks.
Okay.
And this is a perfect matchup for them. Engineered Explosives allows you to take care of a swarm of 1-drops or 0-drops or 2-drops right away, and
Right.
you need some way to handle that.
Okay. Anything else jump out at you to separate this from just, like I say, a generic stock Blue Moon list?
Not really. There's a lot of very normal cards here. The one other card that jumps out to me that probably we won't see much in this matchup is Academy Ruins as a way to recur Torrential Gear Hulks and Engineered Explosives.
Correct. Just another way to, once the lock is down, generate that value.
Correct.
Hopping over to Panzer's deck, not quite as value-focused, playing a burn list.
Yes.
We have tap, mountains, go face.
Yeah, we have a very classic aggro versus control list here. And there's just Goblin Guides and Swift Spears and Eidolon of the Great Revel and a bunch of cards that do 3 or 4 damage. And you need to deal your opponent 20, and then you win.
Right. It's, the very classic, do I have 20 points of burst in my hand? I do? Cool. I don't? That sucks.
Correct.
Again, any tech choices that jump out to you in this list to separate it from just a run-of-the-mill stock burn list?
No, this is pretty stock. There's the 2 Inspiring Vantages as new painless red-white dual lands early. But other than that, it's just a lot of cards that we've seen in burn lists for many years now, since Monastery, Swift Spear, and Eidolon have been printed.
So, when we look at the matchup of the two, one interesting question I would have for you is the card Blood Moon. Does the fact that the burn list is only running 3 mountains make Blood Moon better than you might think?
Well, main deck at least, the only cards that not having red shuts off are Boros Charm and Lightning Helix. So it turns off 7 cards out of the entire deck, which is not a very large amount. But if Blue Moon gets lucky and Burn is stuck with a bunch of Boros Charms and Lightning Helixes in hand, it can steal a win that it shouldn't.
Right. Okay, so then wider than that, what are your general thoughts on the matchup here?
This is going to be very tough for Blue Moon, I think. The best answer they have early is the Engineered Explosives, and that only works if Panzer's hand is very creature-heavy. If he just goes Lava Spike, Lava Spike, Lava Spike, Bolt, 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 it's not going to do enough. Engineered Explosives will not.
Because if the cards do roughly 3 damage each, 7 cards gets you there.
Exactly. But if Blue Moon can stabilize, there's a shot. The main problem is going to be finding a win condition early enough and fending off the cards that burn draws off of the top of their deck and hoping you have enough counter spells.
Right. Obviously, the counter spells, hoping to really stop those last few spells from going for lethal.
Yep, but you only have so many counter spells, and you have to hope that you have the right setup of mana for them.
Mm-hmm. Anything else before we hop down to the table and see what the players have in their opening hands?
So, one thing that is not necessarily common burn play, but possibly should be, is sometimes if you just run out of spells in your hand as burn, you'll draw a card and say go until you have 7 cards left in your hand, because if you cast 4 or 5 spells in a turn, they're not going to be able to counter them all after that once you've drawn up to 7. So we have to see whether Panzer plays like that or just tries to cast spell after spell that he draws, trying to get each of them through every turn.
Okay, so if you're not up against a super tight clock, to just wait to say 2 lightning bolts, end of your turn, untap lava spike sort of thing?
Exactly. If you just wait and load up a bunch of cards, you can overload the counter spells from a deck like this.
And certainly, I think the burn is not more expensive than the counter spells.
Correct.
And probably often even cheaper, would be my guess.
Correct.
Okay. So if we hop down to the table here, I believe Kdowns is on the play for game 1. So if we look at his hand first, 2 islands, a mountain, a steam vent, a snapcaster, a mana leak, and a Vendilion Clique. Does this hand do enough?
It's tough. This is a tough hand to mull, even against burn. You can mana leak something. You have Snapcaster Mage, which can be either just a flash 2/1 to kill a Goblin Guide, or you can wait until turn 4 and snap back the mana leak. Plus with Vendilion Clique to possibly take a burn spell out of their hand. It's really, really tough to mulligan this in a matchup that's already really tough for you.
Right, like in theory, you have a 2, 3, 4 kind of curve sort of thing. But, yeah, I don't know. I think this is certainly a questionable hand. We'll have to see if he thinks this is enough gas against this very fast burn deck.
It very well may be. And he also
bonus points for the unglued lands. I'm a big fan.
He also does have the option of V-clicking himself in order to try to draw to more answers later.
Right, absolutely. Vendilion Clique does target a player. It can be yourself or an opponent. It does not always have to be the opponent. And if we hop over to Panzer's hand, a Sacred Foundry, a Lavamancer, a Eidolon, and a bunch of burn. Does this deck need a second land?
It generally needs a second land at some point, but it generally doesn't need more than that. On the draw, while this is a risky hand, it's also a very keepable hand, because if you find a land in your first 2 draws, you're set. If you draw like a Goblin Guide or keep drawing 1-mana burn spells, you're also pretty set.
And the one thing that jumps out to me is obviously, we don't know if Blood Moon will be in play or not. We do see he does have the white mana, but also 2 of those cards that do require white mana.
Yes.
Just interesting to note based on what you had said earlier. And we can also see if maybe he prioritizes playing those spells if he keeps this hand before a potential Blood Moon comes down.
Right. It's going to be really interesting to see how this matchup plays out with these hands if they keep them. And I think both of them are keepable.
Absolutely. And I also think both could be mulligan. I think they're both on that line, to me at least.
They're both very borderline, and it depends on the player's familiarity with the matchup and comfort with the decks.
And probably, frankly, their tolerance for risk.
Correct.
Kdowns is keeping. I think that was the easier of the 2 hands to keep. I think Panzer's hand lends itself more to getting hosed, but, like you said, is also extremely powerful if you top decks a mountain.
Yeah, It would be much better if the Lavamancer were a Goblin Guide. I think you keep that most every time if that's a Goblin Guide, but with it being a
Correct.
Lavamancer as your 1-mana creature, it's much harder to keep.
Right, because that's a card that is not nearly as good if you're stuck on one land.
Correct.
Both because that uses up the land, and also you're going to have less cards in your graveyard if you're only playing one spell a turn, even if it's burn.
Yeah. And we can see him taking a long time to make this decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very tough hand.
And worth noting, doesn't have a fetch land as his one land, which again would hurry up his graveyard a little bit. He does pitch it. Finds a different hand that has 3 lands, but some action.
This seems pretty reasonable. You have Swift Spear on 1 to attack. You have Searing Blaze to... Well, the problem is that Blue Moon doesn't have many creatures, so you're going to have to try to find a time to hit something with that. It's also pretty tough.
Correct. It's tough. Luckily, you do have the Lavamancer again. Good in this case that you have maybe some excess lands. Can always funnel those through the Lavamancer if you get enough gas. Does keep Scries to the bottom. So if we take a look at what he threw back an Inspiring Vantage. So definitely not what he's looking for with this hand.
Lands than that.
Turn 1 Steam Vents.
Get that tap out of the way quickly.
I was going to say, I would assume, wants to use it when he doesn't need to shock himself, because that's absolutely not what you're trying to do in this matchup. Panzer draws an Eidolon. Okay.
That's a pretty good draw.
Absolutely.
Especially with a Swift Spear here against a deck that's not going to be playing many creatures and putting you under much pressure.
Mm-hmm. That Swift Spear is gonna very much potentially get out of hand.
Panzer, perhaps not realizing that Swift Spear has haste, declines to attack.
That's we're still ironing out some kinks with some of these decks potentially. Island Go from Kdowns. Panzer picks up a Skullcrack.
Not the life gain, not super relevant main deck in this matchup, but it is essentially a 4-point burn spell because it adds a point of damage to the Swift Spear whenever he wants to cast that.
Right, assuming the Swift Spear is still around. Is the Swift Spear something that's worth throwing your Snapcaster Mage in front of?
Not when you can mana leak this Eidolon.
Correct. Okay, yes. This Eidolon going to present much, much more damage than even one turn of Swift Spear.
Right, but you definitely play the leak first to prevent that damage. Ooh, here's the Blood Moon.
Finds the Blood Moon. If we look back at Panzer's hand, nothing with white in it yet. Does have a Scalding Tarn that he'd probably like to crack. Just because there's a Lavamancer in play.
Right.
Well, or in his hand.
Yes. Declines to play it. Looks like he's going to hold up Snapcaster or Vendilion Click here.
Finds another Lavamancer. Looks like we are getting the Click.
If he Searing Blazes in response here to kill, Click, and deal 1 and pump up the Swift Spear, that's a pretty handy play.
Yeah, it's not super intuitive because you're giving up 2 damage from Searing Blaze. But yeah, this is great.
He's going to Skullcrack instead, which is a little less relevant in terms of the amount of damage, because the Click can just block the Swift Spear here and kill it, while Searing Blaze, if it had killed the Click instead, ends up being about the same amount of damage between the 2 from Swift Spear and the 1 that Searing Blaze would have done to Kdowns.
Correct.
Looks like Kdowns is more scared of the Lavamancer, which surprises me a bit since the Searing Blaze can take care of a bunch of his creatures.
Mm-hmm. So
But
sorry,
against Lava,
Skullcrack was cast, right?
and he drew another one off of the Vendilion.
Right. No, but so the prowess trigger did happen,
The
though.
prowess trigger did happen, yes.
Yeah, okay. And there we go. Fetch is just a basic mountain.
Gonna play out this Lavamancer,
Mm-hmm.
possibly
One would
attack
think.
with Swift Spear. If he's alright trading them off, then, yep, he is alright trading them off, is Kdowns.
Yeah,
He is indeed.
he is. Yes, that's a good use of that Vendilion click, I believe.
Absolutely. Which is
and
why
again,
I feel like the Searing Blaze would have been a much better choice of card to play there.
Yeah, it's
Skullcrack.
It's a harder line to see because, again, on the surface, you're like, oh, I haven't played my land yet this turn, and I don't want just Searing Blaze. But when you think of how much damage it forces through this turn and in future turns, and it gives you a target for Searing Blaze. As we've discussed, that's not something that's super free.
It is not free. Likely holding up Lavamancer to deal 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because he can Helix or Skullcrack end of Kdowns next turn, as well as Lava
And hold up
something.
the... exactly. Does have 4 cards in his graveyard currently.
And against a control deck like this, you definitely want to be casting stuff on their turn to make them tap out before yours.
Yep. And again, we've seen, you mentioned that in the pregame, he did just draw pass, and Kdowns draw passes. Yeah, assume end of turn. Here we go. We're going to see the Lightning Helix.
He can Snapcaster Mana Leak this.
Choosing not to. And again, we see casting the spell that requires the white mana. So very good sequencing from that perspective.
Yes. It looks like Kdowns is just making sure that Panzer can't get anything too scary through here. Like this Eidolon. This is something that
Correct.
you definitely would not want to have resolved if he had tried to Snapcaster Mana Leak the Lightning Helix.
Mm-hmm. Assume we're going to see, the Snapcaster Mana Leak on this Eidolon. Absolutely cannot let that resolve.
Correct. Now Panzer has the decision to make of Lavamancer the Snapcaster or Lavamancer Kdowns at end of turn. With Kdowns at 11, I assume that you just keep trying to hit him because all your spells deal 3 damage, basically.
Mm-hmm. The only reason you'd need to get rid of the Snapcaster is if you're planning on getting through with attacks. And
he's not
going
to do that at this point.
Explosives for 1 is played.
Yep, there is the Explosives. Takes care of a problematic creature, as we figured it might in the matchup.
Is the Lavamancer enough of a long-term threat to pop it now, or do you wait to see if other creatures come down that you could hit with it?
You absolutely take care of it now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because it gets 2 more damage off if you save it for your opponent's turn. And the longer you wait, the longer of a problem it's going to be.
Correct.
It just keeps adding the damage. It looks not that scary, but it's pretty scary.
That Eidolon is being exiled, I assume, correct?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I believe that was cast instead of exiled, is my understanding. For the turn, draws a Scalding Tarn. Not the draw he's looking for at this point.
It lets him get his landfall off of Searing Blaze.
That's fair,
so he can
with the
cast both
Snapcaster.
spells right now.
And actually, that's another reason not to Lavamancer the Snapcaster, is we were talking about targets for Searing Blaze.
Exactly. And this ends up putting Kdowns to 3, which is just
Right.
1 spell away from death.
Right. We haven't seen the Lightning Bolt yet. Haven't seen a Lava Spike yet. I don't think we've seen a Boros Charm yet, so...
Well, he cannot cast Boros Charm anymore.
Correct. Oh, that's right. Blood Moon has come down, you're right. We see the Serum Visions here.
It's a redraw and trying to set up his next turn. He needs to start finding counter spells or a way to win the game quickly, because every spell of Panzer's is about to get scary.
Right, and as we discussed, this deck does not have too many ways to win the game quickly. It tries to take control of the match. 2 on the bottom. So whatever he's looking for, let's take a look here. But it does not look like he found them. Blood Moon Lightning Bolt. Yeah, not...
Don't care about either of those.
So what does he care about right now? Like, what card in his deck is live and super relevant? Just
Cryptic
infinite
Command,
counterspells?
Cryptic Command, Mana Leak, Spell Snare.
Gearhulk, I guess?
Gearhulk is very close to relevant, because it is a clock.
Because he needs a clock, because he's not just going to top deck infinite counterspells. So he does at some point need to find a clock, I would think.
Absolutely.
And if Panzer goes for it, he has it.
Well,
does
that
go
can't
for
be
it.
Mana Leak, so he only has Cryptic Command to try to stop
Mm-hmm.
it. And it is going to do it.
And yeah, Kdowns looks like there was nothing coming super quickly either.
It's a real tough matchup for the control deck, especially pre-sideboard. But
Right, especially... So yeah, let's talk sideboarding. You think this gets much better for Blue Moon, I assume, based on the way you just phrased that?
absolutely. Out of the sideboard, Kdowns has another Engineered Explosives, 2 Anger of the Gods, Dispel, Negate, another Vendilion Click, and even a Roast. All these cards are answers to things that Panzer does that Kdowns is scared of. Dispels and Negates are just more counter spells. The Angers clears out all the scary creatures. Engineered Explosives also takes care of creatures. Roast is a creature removal spell. We saw the Click last turn. It's an early threat as well as can block a creature. And what you really want to be doing is putting those cards that you care about in and taking out things that don't matter as much, like Glimmer of Genius. Probably you cut the Gear Hulk. You strongly consider cutting Blood Moon and probably do it.
Now, are we seeing anything in the sideboard for Panzer that would make him more vulnerable to Blood Moon that would likely be coming in?
Well, depending on whether Panzer wants to shore up his matchup against some of Kdowns' threats a little more, there are paths to exile. There's a Deflecting Palm, which is a 5 damage burn spell off a Gear Hulk, essentially. And if Panzer is scared of Blood Moons, he also has Destructive Revelry, and his only way to cast that is off of Stomping Ground, which can be Blood Mooned away. But Destructive Revelry is the only way to take care of a Blood Moon. If you don't bring in the Destructive Revelries, you just don't care that much about the Blood Moons, because you're just playing red spells.
Looks like the players are still doing some sideboarding. Panzer is taking the Boros Charms out, bringing in the Destructive Revelry.
It is a way to kill Gear Hulks as well as the possible Blood Moons, I guess.
Kdowns is taking out his explosives.
I guess he feels like they're a little too slow to deal with all the 1-mana creatures, and he'd rather have Angers for that, but that's about the same.
Taking out just a single Blood Moon, it looks like. Panzer also takes out a Searing Blaze in lieu of a Sudden Shock. So for Panzer, Boros Charms come out, 1 Searing Blaze comes out, Sudden Shock goes in, Destructive Revelry goes in. For Kdowns, it looks like he's bringing in Negates, Dispel, and V-Click, and taking out Glimmer, Explosives, and one Blood Moon.
Alright, it looks like what Kdowns cares about in the matchup is the spells and not the creatures.
Mm-hmm.
What he's taking care of is everything that deals with creatures. He's not having good answers to those creatures.
Right. Which is dangerous, because if one of those lands, you can no longer counter it, and it's a recurring source of damage, of course.
I guess he's hoping to lightning bolt those, electrolyze those, block those with his creatures, but it's tough. It's a very tough matchup for control. You need to have your answers match up very well to their threats.
All right. And so if we go in to see what the players have in their starting hands, Kdowns will be on the play again. His hand has 3 lands, a Mana Leak, a Negate, a Snapcaster, and an Electrolyze. This seems pretty good to me.
It's pretty good. It's very painful mana with 2 fetch lands and a Steam Vents, but you can play the Steam Vents tap turn 1 and then fetch out a bunch of basics.
Correct, yeah.
It's totally reasonable. It's not a hand you really should be mulliganing against Burn.
I mean, it's the lands are a bit painful. I just don't think you're going to get too much better than this.
I agree.
If we hop over to what Panzer has, 2 lands, 2 Goblin Guides, a Swift Spear, a Lightning Helix, and a Destructive Revelry.
That hand's
holy crap. Yes, this is...
Especially with all the engineered explosives that were taken out.
This is close to the nuts, I think. Turn 1 fetch. I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah, that surprises me.
For Panzer, which haste creature do you want to play and start swinging with first?
I think you play Goblin Guide first. It's more damage. You can Goblin Guide, then Swift Spear Goblin Guide, and you're attacking for 2, then 3 is 5, as opposed to 1, then
4 is, yeah.
Also 5.
No, sorry, 1, then 3 is 4. But
4,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're playing 2 creatures on the second turn, so it's going to be the same damage anyway, since you're not playing any spells. So I guess it doesn't matter that much. You just play out a bunch of creatures, and then...
No, you get an extra attack with a Goblin Guide, and this gives you an extra point of damage, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
And also worth noting, because it's so creature-heavy, not likely to be activating Prowess in the first couple turns anyways.
Exactly.
It does give an extra Goblin Guide trigger.
Cryptic Command. That's a slow one. I would
fetch
that away.
That's super slow. And also, if he fetches it away, has the ability to grab a Shockland. Right? Without shocking himself. Because drawing the Cryptic forces him to wait till next turn when he wants access to 2 mana. Looks like he is fetching it away. Let's make sure he hides the top card of his library. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's down to 17, and next turn we expect to see...
Swinging for 5.
Well...
Assuming nothing is countered. Assuming which... But he's going to have to... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the sequencing next turn is weird because of the Mana Leak. So, if Panzer is going to play 2 spells, he could play the first one trying to get it through... to try to get it Mana Leaked first. Or he could play something trying... It's really tricky here. Because Kdowns has to think about what he wants to counter. If he feels that a creature is a bait spell for a non-creature, he can just Mana Leak, or he can save the negate for the second spell.
Can you just help them resolve the Goblin Guide ability on the stack? There we go. Yeah, it's interesting. So, if he knew that there was a mana leak in his hand, which creature does he want to have resolved? The second Goblin Guide or the Swift Spear?
I think the
Or the third Goblin Guide?
Wow. You just play Goblin Guide here, and one of them gets mana leaked.
Wow, this is the hand that Blue Moon just is not equipped to deal with. Correct?
Correct. Now, is Panzer scared of engineered explosives? Definitely not, because he's playing out his Goblin Guides.
I mean, even if he happens to have it, he didn't play it on his turn, and you're getting him for 6. I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah, this is a lot of damage very quickly. This is why this is such a tough matchup for Control, is you can't answer all of these, especially when you sided out all your engineered explosives and don't have any angers.
Choosing only does want the Swift Spear and tests it with a Goblin Guide, so it does seem to value having the Swift Spear.
Well, the Swift Spear, if he plays multiple 1-mana spells in a turn, can get bigger than a Goblin Guide. This has to get mana leak.
Also,
right?
Worth noting how having multiple Goblin Guides interacts with the attack triggers. Basically, if they hit multiple lands, it's really bad for you, but if they have a single non-land card, it just jams all of them.
Well, with a fetch land, he can respond to the second one if the first one doesn't show a land.
Yes, sorry, I was talking. Yes.
And I think he's probably just casting Snapcaster and blocking one of these creatures here. Without him having mana leaked, it's really the only play he can do at this point.
Right. And at this point, in a vacuum, is one of the Goblin Guides still worth killing over the Swift Spear that has the potential to be more explosive?
I would block the Swift Spear here because it's scarier over the long term to me.
Right. To a turn...
You won't necessarily be able to block it later.
Okay. To a turn, you can count on, you can manage. I don't actually know if you can deal with it, but you can at least plan around it.
Yeah, but...
Blocks a Goblin Guide.
That's very reasonable. It's a tough decision either way.
It's a tough decision, but if Panzer has triple Lightning Bolt next turn, you are so dead.
Absolutely. Now he has Mana Leak or Negate or Electrolyze to kill one of your creatures.
Right.
This is so little interaction with how inefficient these spells are.
And still cannot get access to a third mana without hurting himself. Looks like there may be a judge call. Wait, what happened with the... I thought he shuffled...
There was no shuffle. He just searched his library.
Okay. So what is the ruling on the field?
We're just going to have him put it back and shuffle and redraw.
Okay.
It's pretty non-disruptive. Everybody knew it was there. Everybody sees that there was no shuffle.
Mm-hmm. Eesh.
That's worse.
I mean, maybe not worse because he already had an Electrolyze, but like I said, even if he just gets a basic, he has to hurt himself with the fetch just to be able to have access to Electrolyze. Wow. Finds a Searing Blaze that'll be really punishing if a creature is played.
Yeah. There's question here if you want to just Goblin Guide and then swing
Attack.
out and see what happens. Because if they
Yeah.
cast a creature, you can fetch Searing Blaze and really blow your opponent out.
Correct. So just to confirm, there is room to kill the creature before it declares a block, correct?
Correct.
Yes, okay. In which case, like you said, this is a total stomp.
Depending on what Kdowns tries to do here, he can try to mana leak it, and then Panzer can get whatever he wants through.
That's the problem, is you're tapping down so much by mana leaking.
Oh boy.
If his plan is Snapcaster, he's in for a rude awakening.
Absolutely. Assuming Panzer knows how this interaction works, but it's a fairly common interaction, so I would assume he does. But it's not trivial. You do not want that Torrential Gearhulk.
You absolutely do not. But do you want to commit to a land now? I guess you do.
You just get a basic island, probably, and then that's fine. Now, what's his plan?
I mean, presumably his plan is to see what he gets off the second Goblin Guide.
Yep. There's the land. It's a basic, too, so it lets him play whatever. Now,
Electrolyze works out a lot better than Snapcaster, based on information we have.
Right.
And it looks like he finds that line.
You have to Electrolyze a Goblin Guide here. You have to assume your opponent has some sort of burn spell.
Yeah. Also gets blown out if he tries to Electrolyze the Swift Spear.
You cannot do that.
Yeah, okay. Correctly hits the... And is it worth...
It's an extra point of damage, but you can possibly force your opponent to tap down on their turn if you just pass here.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, gets him... Essentially, the Lightning Helix does 4 if you do it now, so it would drop him, what, to 5? That's tempting.
Yeah, I mean, it might be what he's doing now. It's a little unclear, because he is fetching right now.
Should know that the players are communicating on voice, so there may be a few things that aren't quite clear to us until it happens. But yeah, fetching a Foundry untapped, have to assume, here comes the Helix. Essentially does 4, like I said.
Assuming that this was in combat, yes.
Maybe not?
Yeah, it looks like it was post-combat. Players are communicating, so I'm going to assume they know what's going on here.
Whose turn is it? I think Panzer thought it was his turn.
I think Panzer thought it was his turn.
I think he thought he was doing that end of turn. Oh boy.
Okay, we're just tapping everything down.
Is he gonna shuffle that mountain back? Yeah. Kdowns drops the basic mountain.
It can lightning bolt something and take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
May have gotten through this.
Yeah, being at 6 instead of 5 is huge. Although... does still get blown out if he's trying to use... Oh no, because he can Snapcaster Bolt, okay.
He can Snapcaster Bolt.
But that still drops him to 3 off of the Searing Blaze.
Not if there's no land.
Oh, no land. Correct, okay, yeah. You have to assume if the Snapcaster comes into play, we see Searing Blaze post-combat Lava Spike.
I think that has to happen, yeah.
And I assume that has to be the play for Kdowns at this point, right? Like, he tapped down, he played Bolt, which took him off of Cryptic.
Yes. Here comes the Lava Spike. Is there a counter for this, or does he go to 1? It's really tough.
Oh, he didn't Snapcast. Oh, okay.
He's going to take it. Is he going to try to Snapcaster Bolt here and just die to Searing Blaze?
I don't know if I agree with this line at all.
It's a very risky line. You basically have to hope your opponent has nothing.
And there you go. That's it. But, like, what are you afraid of that you're not willing to do this in combat?
I'm not sure what you're afraid of.
Because you just took a bunch of damage from that Goblin guy that you did not have to.
That's a lot of extra damage.
And that's lethal.
It sure is. No spell snare to kill a burn spell, and that's it. Burned out.
Speaking of which, I guess... No, yeah, that was greedy of Panzer to play that before the last land was committed for the Lightning Bolt. Because he gets blown out by spell snare.
It absolutely was. You want to make sure that they pay their mana first, so that they're spending it on that.
Because even if he says Snapcaster targeting Bolt, he's not committed to casting the Bolt at that point.
Correct.
That would have been real awkward had there been a spell snare in that hand.
Yes, it would have been pretty awkward. But there
doesn't happen.
And Panzer takes it in the classic case of burn crushing control because it just has too many threats too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we said, this control deck is not a control deck that wins very quickly. It's a control deck that expects to lock you out of both casting spells and having mana, and that doesn't work very well.